I wonder why I haven't gotten around to playing Final Fantasy Mythic Quest. Seeing Nintendo Capri Sun's Let's Play of it made me think about getting it, and I don't know why I didn't get it until last November. Eventually, I got my hands on it, and it was good, but not as good as NCS made it look. What sets us back is that it's a tiny bit harder to take seriously than the other Final Fantasy games, because the mood doesn't feel as powerful. That's not to say the gameplay isn't good. Now there are more puzzles here with the usage of the jump button, and the moves that interact with the field. The enemies also make different poses when you hit them enough times, so that you can know how close you are to defeating them. One thing that annoyed me about the normal Final Fantasy titles, as well as in RPGs in general, is the random encounters, because there's no way of telling when an enemy will jump out of you, so you might not be prepared for them. Here, however, they're visible, so now you know when you're supposed to fight them. Only flaw is that you have to fight them again every time you re-enter the dungeon. Oh well, enemies weakening you is always a problem in Final Fantasy anyways. The exploration isn't as prominent because it uses a map system, but at least now it's easier to tell where you're supposed to go. This is a good game. I didn't like Pokemon Colosseum, which was a shame because I really wanted to. I still tried playing Pokemon XD Gale of Darkness, which was worlds better for me. While the battles were still way too plentiful, even for an RPG game, at least they had some emphasis on the overworlds because, unlike then, there are more puzzles like riding hooks across some platforms and pushing blocks. Purifying Pokemon isn't as redundant because now there's a Purify Chamber where you can store up to 9 Pokemon at once when they get purified, and that's excluding the Pokemon that are currently with you. Not only that, there are also some Pokespots where you encounter wild Pokemon. Shadow Pokemon are your main way of getting them, but it's nice to at least see some wild ones in XD too, in the Pokespots because it's more traditional. One of my complaints in Colosseum was that there were like practically no Gen 3 Pokemon you could get, but now there are more of them obtainable in Gale of Darkness, so Gale of Darkness actually does feel like it hails from the 3rd generation of Pokemon. And thus, fixing so many flaws with Pokemon Colosseum. You see, this is what I feel like Colosseum should have been. I've gotten games the day they came out, but it took until last year to get a new IP game on launch date. Splatoon is a formula for greatness. Despite having some flaws like some levels feeling more like a get to the other side of the map objective rather than solving puzzles, and the stupid 3 life limit that has messed me up on some occasions, especially the final boss, everything else makes up for it. A paint shooting game that makes room for tons of puzzle elements. It's a very addicting experience, and because Inklings can swim in paint, spraying the ground and swimming in it to gain speed is amazing. I know this game was made for online, but I found myself playing single player more. Online's still fun with the challenge of getting more paint of your color on the battlefield than your opponent's color. There have even been some themes with the Splatfest adding some variety, like the whole naughty and nice thing around Christmas time. When I first played Splatoon, I was kind of unsure if I liked it or not, but after playing it a second time, I grew to love it. I've gotten sick and tired of everyone talking about Shovel Knight. I mean, everyone talked about it saying that it's the best game ever made and that it is literally flawless. But, unlike some people who hate on it merely because of its popularity, I admitted that I have no right to hate it for that reason because it's not Yacht Club Games' fault that it got talked about so much. In fact, I thought it looked like a good experience, and I decided to give it a try to see if it was good. Turns out, it was! Before playing it, I thought it was going to be like Castlevania levels of difficulty, but it wasn't. Shovel Knight was actually pretty fair while still having some challenging portions in it. Even though it's a modern game with 8-bit graphics, it shows what modern games can do with stuff coming out of the background and attacking you, and letting you see the effects of a thunderstorm. You wouldn't expect that from an ordinary NES game, so seeing that in an 8-bit video game seems amazing. The soundtrack is also pretty nice. While not as outstanding as the other games I played, definitely a game that I'm glad I got my hands on. A lot of people were asking me to get Fire Emblem Awakening, and did I like it? Yes. Awakening has some new innovations like having characters talk during their turns, even vocal cutscenes, and the pair-up system, and even having some of your units get married, some which even have kids in some bonus chapters. And you'll even create your own character in Awakening too. When you combine those two aspects, If you think a character is likable enough, you can think of her as an in-game girlfriend. Or in-game boyfriend if you're a girl, but you get what I'm saying. One thing I loved about Sacred Stones was being allowed to return to previous maps to train up your characters, so I am forever grateful of Intelligence Systems for bringing it back. You also get a choice of if you want your characters to stay or not if they fall in battle. You can choose casual mode to keep them in if you want it to be fair, or choose to just have them die if they fall by choosing classic mode, thus making it more challenging. Awakening is still a challenge towards the end even with that. No wonder it saved the franchise from being forgotten. Combine that with a very cheesy yet more memorable story, and you get a game that I like much more than Radiant Dawn. Final Fantasy VI is an improvement over Final Fantasy V. In Final Fantasy IV, you had a lot of party members, but some of them left your party forever after a while. You couldn't choose which ones you want with you. In Final Fantasy V, most of your party members came back, but you didn't have a lot. In Final Fantasy VI, you get a lot of party members, and you can switch your characters in and out. It also introduces 2 new ways of battling. Pincer attack, where multi-target moves only hit enemies on one side, or when you surround an enemy, where you surround the opponents and deal extra damage to enemies when their backs are turned. It's also a beautiful sight watching the airship fly over the lens in third-person view, even if it does look a bit awkward thanks to graphical limitations. It's also one of the darkest games in the Super Nintendo library, for reasons you probably know, but I'm not going to spoil it for the people who don't. The rumors are right. Kefka is definitely an awesome villain, because he's crazy while still being one of those sinister villains that you'll just love to hate. The music, while not as good as Final Fantasy IV's music, is better than 5's in my opinion, though they can have some pretty generic names. But I like the songs themselves, and I like the game. Yoshi's Woolly World is a revolutionary game, but where do I begin? As some of you know, I love Kirby's Epic Yarn and its yarn-like art style, so it only makes sense that since I love both that and the Yoshi games, that I like this too. Everything looks so astounding and it has a bigger variety of music than the Yoshi's Island trilogy. It even has similar mechanics to it, except with stars being replaced with hearts, only this time they don't count back up to 10, so it doesn't ruin the challenge in areas without gaps like the first game did. The red coins are replaced with stamps that can unlock cool images. It still has the flowers, but also has 5 yarn pieces, which if you get all 5 in a level, you'll knit another type of Yoshi back together. You know how Yoshi's New Island improved on being able to get all the red coins, flowers, and stars separately in one run-through? Well, Yoshi's Woolly World has even more! Now you can get each flower, stamp, and yarn piece separately, and when you go to the level again, they make the ones you already got transparent, so it's easier to tell which ones you did or didn't get, like in the new Super Mario Bros. Games. What about the secret levels? Brilliant! Running across giant tidal waves, and a chase segment where Naval Piranha, a boss that has been an easy boss back in the day, is now out for blood. But one problem with Woolly World is the bosses. They're not bad, they're just weak. They feel like the same bosses with slightly different attacks, because it seems like nearly all of them are defeated by throwing eggs at them followed by ground pounding or using Yoshi's tongue. It comes off as rather lazy. At least New Island's Kamek battles have interesting ways of using your eggs as opposed to just using an egg followed by the same thing, unlike here, but this is easily one of my favorite 2D platformers. Donkey Kong Country Tropical Freeze and Super Mario 3D World were, in my mind, better than the original games. So, I knew that Kirby and the Rainbow Curse would be better than Canvas Curse, at least in my opinion. It wasn't what it could have been, but Rainbow Curse is better in my mind because you have a bigger screen so it's easier to draw on. Even though you don't have copy abilities, you do have transformations. The tank, the submarine, and the rocket. You can control Kirby by drawing a line for him or by tapping him, and that was already a really good concept in Canvas Curse. Now it can do more stuff like attracting a marble to certain places, digging through the clay, or blocking a waterfall. In Canvas Curse, the only bosses you got to face in ball form were Drashia and Krako, but in Rainbow Curse, they're all fought in ball form, which I honestly prefer over the minigame bosses in Canvas Curse because they could be pretty frustrating, especially Paint Roller, which was fine in the first challenge, but the others need you to draw at inhuman speeds. That is why I like these bosses more. As for the game itself, the claymation art style is gorgeous to look at, and it has wonderful soundtrack. Though Rainbow Curse doesn't explain why Kirby is involved from this time. Canvas Curse explained why, but in Rainbow Curse, he just rolls with no real explanation. But it's still awesome, and it had the pieces to be number one. The near perfect art style and soundtrack, and how it made up for Canvas Curse's flaws. So why isn't it number one? Well, simply because of the fact that it gets dull after a while. I mean, playing it nowadays, it doesn't capture nearly the amount of luster I had when I first played it, but the good memories I had from my first experience playing it are enough for me to put it up here. Man, Pokepark 2 Wonders Beyond is great, just like its predecessor, Pikachu's Adventure. In addition to having Gen 5 Pokemon in it, now you play as 4 characters: Pikachu, who is the most balanced, Snivy, who can double jump, Tepig, who can charge around, and Oshawott, who can swim. Wonders Beyond is also darker than the first game, because somewhere out there must be a rule where all sequels have to be darker than their original games. Hey, as long as it's intense, I'm not mad. As much as I love the first game, I'll admit that it was lacking in the story department. It was just, the Pokemon is seeming gloomy, so you have to have Mew fix it. In Wonders Beyond, there's this new place called the Wish Park, but this park has the power to hypnotize Pokemon to never leave. That's disturbing if you think about it. I also like the 4 different zones of the Wish Park, because it has a very good variety. I also love the creepy atmosphere and music in them. Though Wonders Beyond doesn't have as many mini-games as Pikachu's Adventure did, they're more plot relevant, and it's a very solid game that's a joy for me to play. And I know I spent a lot of time talking about the Wish Park, but to me, the Wish Park would have to be the defining factor of this game. When I saw Chucky Conroy's Xenoblade Chronicles Let's Play, I thought Xenoblade looked good, but I didn't plan on it yet. But after seeing how beautiful Gower Plains was in Smash 4, I decided maybe I should get Xenoblade Chronicles for myself, and I have no regrets about it. Xenoblade Chronicles is quite an interesting game. It's not like most Nintendo games because of how realistic and serious it is. Heck, I had a hard time believing it was even a Nintendo game. Xenoblade has probably some of the most content in any video game I've seen. It can take about 50 hours to beat it. Because I didn't want to get bored of its long length, I decided to take a few breaks from it and come back to it when I please. Good thing too, because it took me all summer to beat it. And to think, I once thought that Link to the Past was long. The areas are some of the largest in any game I've seen. It can take several hours to explore them fully. Xenoblade Chronicles X's environments were also good, but I kind of preferred when a bit of areas would light up, as opposed to only lighting up when a probe's installed. I thought it looked kind of cool how the land was being revealed as you went along. There's so much to explore. Thank goodness for the arrow that tells you where you need to go most of the time, and for the skip travel system, or this would be the most repetitive game in the world with even worse navigation than the original Metroid. This makes exploring the land even more fun. Customizing your gear not only changes your stats, but also how you look, which is actually very creative. However, there are a few problems. The stupid spike move that enemies can have, which can take like 3/4 of your health within a second, combined with the atrocious collision detection, you'll die straight out of nowhere. Next problem? Even though the voice acting is good, some bosses won't shut up. Even with a few flaws, I'm still amazed with how atmospheric Xenoblade Chronicles is, because it does much more good than bad. And it is my #1 favorite game that I first played in 2015.